Hey friends, it's Miss Healy again. This week we're going to continue talking about partitioning rectangles. I know that you started this last week with Miss Gainey, and we're going to continue it throughout this week as well. This is going to set us up great for our next unit, which is going to be about multiplication. So this will be a great start. So if we've got this down, the multiplication part's going to come a lot easier to us. So just to review, partitioning rectangles means to cut, divide, or split into rows and columns. And just like we did with fractions, we're just going to do the very best that we can to partition or divide them into equal pieces. In this case, we're dividing them or partitioning them into rows and columns, and we want those to be as equal as possible. We're not perfect, but we're just going to do the best that we can. And what I always suggest, I'm going to be using markers today, but when you do this on your paper, you may want to use pencil and just do it very lightly at first, so that if you have to erase it, it's okay. You can go back and adjust it and make your rows or columns more equal. Now, I know that Ms. Gainey shared this tip with you last week, but this tip is super important. You want to always make sure that you draw one less row and column than they're asking for. So if they're asking for a specific number of rows and columns, you want to do one less with your lines, and that will give you the right number of rows and columns. So what we're going to do today is we're going to take some real world examples, some real things that you might need to use this skill for, and you're going to help me do this. So what I'm going to do is pause the video, or have you pause the video, and I want you to make sure that you have either a piece of paper and a pencil, or a crayon, or a whiteboard, or something that you can use to do some rectangle division with me. Okay, so hopefully you have your pencil and paper and we're ready to start. The first example that we're going to use is a baking example. And Miss Healy loves to bake. And so I want you to think about a pan of brownies that you might have seen made before at your house. So this is supposed to be my pan. And what we're going to do is divide this into 2 rows and 10 columns. And then we're going to count all of the squares that are going to be close to the same size or equal, and we're going to put those in the total, and that's how many brownies that I'm going to end up with. So I'm going to switch over to brown for my brownies. And if you remember, rows run side to side. And so when we're talking about 2 rows, don't forget our tip over here, we're going to draw one less row. So how many rows would we need, or how many lines would we need to draw 2 rows? One line. So I'm going to, as best I can, try to find a good middle space to draw one line going across. Now, because I have that one line going across, I have 1 row, 2 rows. Okay, now the tricky part is 10 columns. So because I have 10 and my columns go up and down, I need 1 less. So 1 less line than 10 columns would be 9 lines that I need to draw, which is a lot. So I'm going to kind of just guess here with my pencil. It's a little trick. Just kind of space them out a little bit just to kind of see how many I'm getting. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I was able to come up with 9 little dots. Now I can draw them and see if they're pretty equal. If they're not, that's okay. I can go back, and I didn't put marks all over my paper, so I can go back and adjust if I don't end up with equal-ish size columns. So we need 9 lines, which should give us 10 columns. Now these brownies are a very interesting shape, but maybe we need them to be that way for a particular reason. Okay, so let's count our columns, and we should have 10 columns now. And columns go up and down. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we have 2 rows and we have 10 columns. So we divided it exactly as it was supposed to be divided. Now, all we have to do is count our squares to come up with the total number of brownies that I have in my pan. I'm gonna label these. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So if there's 10 on this row, how many would be on this row? Probably the same number, right? Let's just double check to be sure. Hopefully you're coming up with 20 brownies. So in all, I have about 20 equal pieces of brownies to share with my friends. Okay, here's where you're going to jump in. We're going to work on these together. We're going to check them together, but I want to give you some time to try it out on your own first. So for this real world example, we have a bookshelf. So we're going to pretend that this bookshelf is going in Miss Healy's classroom. And I need this bookshelf to have little cubbies in it, little places to put book boxes. And I want it to have a certain number of rows, which will be the shelves, and then the columns will be those dividers that go in between so that each book box has its own cubby. So I want it to have 5 rows and 4 columns, but I need to double check to find out how many book boxes would fit in there if I have 5 rows and 4 columns, so that I know that I have enough book boxes for my students. So what I want you to do is think about this tip, always drawing 1 less row and 1 less column. And then I want you to pause the video, draw a rectangle that's going up and down like this, and you can make it as big as you'd like to so that you can space it out. And then I want you to come up with 5 rows, 4 columns, and then come up with the total number of cubbies that I would have in this bookshelf. So I'm going to give you a second and let you pause the video and try that out on your own. Okay, so hopefully you had a chance to do this and now you're checking with us. We'll see if we come up with the same answer. Okay, so what we need to do is draw 1 less row. Remember, rows run side to side. So we need to draw 1 less row, so that should be 4 rows. And we're just gonna kind of do the best that we can here. And remember my trick, if you're using pencil, you could try it first really lightly in pencil, and then if it comes out okay, then you can go over it a little bit. It's a little bit darker. Okay, so I have 4 lines, 1, 2, 3, 4. And because I drew 4 lines, that made 5 rows. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I have my 5 rows. Now I need to draw the lines going up and down the columns so that I can have my little cubbies set up. So hopefully you should have drawn 3 lines because 3 is 1 less than 4. And I'm going to do a middle line. And then I'm going to do 1, oops, there. And 1 there. Okay, so I drew 3 lines. 1, 2, 3 lines going up and down. And let's see how many columns I have. 1, 2, 3, 4 columns. So I have the right number of columns. Now all I have to do is count to be sure that I have enough cubbies in this bookshelf for my students next year, and I know that I'll have the right amount. Okay, so let's go ahead and count as we go. Now we could count by 4s. We could even count by 5s, going the other direction. But it's okay just to actually count the squares. And you don't necessarily have to label them, but you could just count them and touch them as you go. And we have 20 total squares. Now we're going to pause for a second because if you notice, Our answer here was 20 for the brownies, and we also got 20 for the bookshelf cubbies, but we ended up, they look totally different. This has 2 rows and 10 columns. This has 5 rows and 4 columns. So there's different ways that you can end up with the same number a lot of times. And we'll be talking about that a little bit more, especially in the next unit. But I just wanted you to know that you could get the same total number of squares and it could look totally different. Okay, so hopefully you got that same thing and you're gonna have another opportunity to try that. Right now we're gonna do a little garden. We're going to pretend that Miss Healy is planting a garden in her backyard. Miss Healy is not planting a garden. She's not a great gardener. But if I were planting a garden, I would need to know how I should space my plants out so that they would be able to grow in their amount of space. So I would want to plan that out. In my garden, I'd like it to have 3 rows and 6 columns so that I can kind of have my garden divided off so I can have different plants in different sections that are growing. What I'd like for you to do is draw a rectangle that's going horizontally or side to side. And I would like you to try to make a garden that has 3 rows and 6 columns, and then try to count the number of total spaces or squares that I could plant plants in. Okay, pause the video and give that a try. Okay, so we're back. Let's check your work and see if you and I have the same idea. So the first thing we need to do is come up with our number of rows, and remember rows run side to side. And what we're going to do is go ahead and draw our 3 rows, and we do that by using 1 less. So we need to draw 2 lines. So we're going to draw our 2 lines going across. Remember, you can use pencil to give that a try. First, to try to get your equal pieces. And then we need to draw, so we've got 1, 2, 3, we've got our 3 rows. Now we need 6 columns. Columns are going up and down. And we're going to draw 1 less. So we need 5 lines, which will make 6 columns. So let's see, we're going to do about the middle. Okay, pretty close. Okay, so now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines, but let's check our columns. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have the right number of columns. Okay, so now let's go ahead and count them so that we can see how many total spaces that I'm going to have to plant plants. So when I go to the store to buy some plants for my garden, I'll know exactly how many spaces I need or I have to plant and how many plants I need to buy. Hopefully you came up with 18. So 18 is our total number of squares when we have 3 rows and 6 columns. I hope that this helped and gave you a little extra practice. We're going to be continuing this again on Wednesday, and we have an activity for you to do that you can just do on a piece of paper like you've been doing, and it will be great practice for you. I hope to see you again really soon. Miss you guys.